Mark. The U.S. economy appears to be staging a strong rebound from the dramatic hit it took from the pandemic, supported by a big vaccination effort and massive monetary and fiscal support coming from the Fed and from the Congress. Welcome now, Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. Senator Toomey serves on the Finance, Budget, and Banking Committee, so he's the man when it comes to economics up on Capitol Hill. Thank you for being back with us, Senator. Great to have you here.
Good morning, David. Thanks for having me.
Give us your take on the economy right now, because a lot of the indicators are pretty green. Is it possible for it to do too well?
Well, no, it's not possible to do too well. I think we have a very, very strong recovery underway. I mean, you've seen all the upward revisions in the economic growth forecast now. The consensus is probably 7% real growth for 2021. We've got all kinds of good news. The employment front is good. We're going to see wage growth. I mean, this is really coming together well. But there are some looming threats out there that I think some folks in this town are underestimating. Some of them may be more medium term, like the tremendous damage that the Biden tax increases will do if they indeed go ahead and inflict those tax increases that they have threatened. But I'm also concerned about inflation. I think we are testing the limits of how much money you can create and pump into the economy and expect prices to remain stable. So I'm concerned.
So you have Chair Powell up there fairly regularly, along often with now the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and you ask them questions about this, and they've been consistent in saying, look, long-term trend has been disinflationary, not inflationary. There are longer-term phenomena at work here. You worked on Wall Street. You know this business. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly true, right? I mean, technology is inherently disinflationary, if not deflationary. Global trade has the same, pushes in the same direction, let's say. But the question is, what's the scale here? And what we've witnessed is an absolutely unprecedented scale of money creation. Literally, M2 has grown in the last year more than at any time since World War II. It's up 25%. Here we have an economy, think about this, we have an economy that the Fed believes is going to grow at more than 6%. I'm guessing consensus is probably over 7% at this point, but the Fed believes it's going to grow at more than 6%. In addition to keeping interest rates at zero, they're nevertheless pumping in $1.4 trillion of cash by buying securities. What is that like the normal thing you do when the economy is growing at 6%? I mean, this is unprecedented. And by the way, I would argue that all the warning signs are blinking at least yellow. You've got asset prices at very high levels, obviously equity prices. You're starting to see all kinds of weird spikes and bubbly kind of activity. Commodities prices have been strong. Bitcoin's gone through the roof. I mean, at some point, you got to be a little concerned, and I'm concerned that what the Fed has told us, what they insist, is that they will be behind the curve. If inflation starts to run, they're going to let it run, and then they're going to try to catch up to it. And I'm a little concerned about that.
To talk about what's going on up at Capitol Hill, or might be going on up at Capitol Hill, do you feel a bit better about infrastructure investment? Let's put aside for a moment exactly what infrastructure is, but as a business person, there's a difference between an expense and a capital investment. If it's true infrastructure, it doesn't really feed inflation, right? It increases productivity and growth.
Look, a certain amount of infrastructure, if it's sensible, if it's actually meeting a need, then it's absolutely very constructive. And of course, we spend a lot of money on infrastructure every year. And I could be persuaded that we could spend even more. But for me, that is about the the underlying infrastructure of our economy. So it's transportation and communication and that sort of thing. Roads and bridges and ports and airports and locks and dams, the kinds of things that allow us to move goods and people and information. Yes, I think that's important, and that can be pro-growth.
Senator, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in some of your questioning of Fed officials, you have sort of suggested they stick to their knitting, that they stick to monetary policy, don't worry about things like climate change and things. As a practical matter, whatever the right or the wrong of that, is there any influence that you, the Congress, has over the Fed in a world in which we have independent Fed authority?
Look, it's a fair point. And while I strongly believe that Congress should not be setting interest rates, for instance, I do think that Congress should decide whether or not the central bank should be determining our climate policy. which is, by the way, a ridiculous idea, right? If we need to do something about climate, it's going to, and I think we do, but it involves difficult trade-offs, that pit economic growth, for instance, against a diminution in the CO2 release. That's a judgment that should be made through our political process by people who are accountable to the American people. That's Congress. That is not the Fed. The Fed has no expertise in this. The Fed has no accountability. They should not be dealing with issues that are outside of their purview.
So, Senator, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, but that's what we do in news because news comes up even as we're talking. And it's now reported, and Bloomberg is reporting, others have reported, that apparently tomorrow President Biden will announce that we'll withdraw the final troops out of Afghanistan by September 11, an important date, as we all know, an anniversary. Without regard to that specific, what do you make of what's going on in Afghanistan? Are we pulling out too soon?
I'm concerned that we're pulling out at a time where the Afghan government, the Afghan army may not be able to hold the country. And I've been worried about this for some time. A resurgence of the Taliban taking over large sections of Afghanistan, maybe the entirety of the nation, that should be deeply disturbing.
Did we succeed in Afghanistan? I think it's the longest war we've ever had, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a very, very long war. You know, it's a very important question, and it starts with how do you define success? We can say with, you know, with certainty that al-Qaeda was no longer able to use Afghanistan as a point of departure, as the launching point to attack the United States again, despite the fact that we know they wanted to do that. And they did it horrifically, but from their point of view, successfully, you know, when they did. So in that sense, we were able to prevent future attacks. But clearly, it's been very, very costly in human life, in American life. It's been costly financially, and it's just a very difficult country.
Senator, really appreciate you being with us and going with us on the news as it developed in directions I didn't anticipate, certainly. Senator Pat Toomey, he's a Republican of Pennsylvania. Coming up.